I started teaching grappling more 2 times a week. I stopped doing the MMA sparring. Just the issues with CTE and all that, and I just don't want to have to sort of regulate that or have that on me. So I just grapple more, and in doing so, the grappling's come up quite a bit, and but I think this is going to be the problem that's going to happen now with MMA and combat sports in general. We're going to see more people with maybe existing conditions come into the sport. As it gets more and more popular, they're going to come in, and not everyone should be hitting the head, really.
Yeah.
Do you not think that the increased popularity is going to be good for that kind of thing? I mean, obviously, more numbers means more people get hurt. I get that, but more money means more awareness, more testing, more stuff like that.
It is, but I mean, just me personally, I don't think everybody is made for fighting. It's their own choice. Like, it's not my choice to say to someone, hey, you can't fight. If you feel you do that. And there's been cases of people that I think, oh, they shouldn't maybe fight, and then they go in the fight and they're like, oh my god, they're an absolute terror. I've got that completely wrong. And then there are some people that you think, oh, they're going to be, I wouldn't want to get in the ring with them, and they're not meant for it. And you never really can tell till someone gives it a go. But I think what we've got to realise is that it's a sport, but it's as close to fighting as we can have it, legally, and it's just sanctioned on a bit of paper that makes it legal. Or it's crazy, if we would have a fight in the street, even if we agreed to it in the street, we could get arrested, or we could get in trouble for doing it. All of a sudden, you just say, well, it's going to be on this night, and we're going to advertise it, and it's okay. I think that's not for everybody. It's great to turn up, hit pads, get fit, have fun, release stress, learn something new, be active. That's great. But stepping in there is a bit different. And I like I say, it's not my choice. It's their choice. They want to do it. But I think the more people that take up the sport, the more people that are going to fight, the more potential there is for injuries and things to happen. And then the sport could get really, really regulated, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But people are going to not be so happy about it. It's like the Isle of Man TT. People die there every year, and there's more and more calls to ban it. I can see why, and I can see why people should say that you shouldn't be hitting each other in the head with blunt force trauma when you don't need to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I guess it's then, as you said, it's down to the person's choice, isn't it? But then, yeah, it's like. Sorry, go on.
It's risk worth versus reward, isn't it? And at the end of the day, like, is it worth it? Like, I think someone say at the gym, like, we've got like Muay Thai, he's an incredible fighter. It is worth it for he can go places, but is it worth it for somebody who's just doing it just to have the experience and what potential life-changing experience is, and the training that goes with that? If you're sparring day in and day out, what issues are you getting from when you're training? You got to be careful with that, and make sure that you only get one brain. Look after it. Spar cleverly. Of course, you've got to have a hard sparring if you're going to fight to begin with, to know that you can get through it. But maybe if you like the way the Thais do, and a lot of people don't spar quite as hard now because they've got to look after their body. Mm-hmm. I think that's going to be a big thing going forward.
So have you stepped away from striking, teaching striking altogether, or just what is it you stepped away from exactly?
In PTs, I've still got like fighters that want to come to me and people that want to strike, and that's really cool. And if I'm asked to take a striking class, I'm happy to do it, and I really enjoy it when I do it. It's more, I don't like taking the sparring class because Robbie, I'd like to think that whenever I've been taking sparring, I've always asked people to try to look after each other, and I've always had like safeties, as paramount. But I've also had really bad injuries in my class, and it's weird. Maybe it's because I can't really explain it, but maybe you're trying to, you say to people, go light, one person goes light, the other person doesn't, and then that's when the injury happens straight away at the beginning of it. Or not necessarily go light, but go clever, look after each other.
I had to that example, like I've got an example of that actually happened to me It was a pretty easy, like I just started the session going pretty easy. And a guy just tried to trip me. So he was putting his left hand on my right hand and essentially trying to trip me going that way.
Sweep, yeah.
And I had my arm here, and somehow like my shoulder popped out of place. Never happened before. And my shoulder popped out and back in. And I immediately like felt sick and felt really bad.
Wow.
And it was a super strange injury. Like he didn't even push that hard. It was a fairly light push. But it, like you said, at the beginning of the session, I already had a near pretty bad injury.
And how many times is it, like you don't realise the injury because of adrenaline or you're fit enough, and then it's not till a little bit later that you realise. I mean, look at a bit different. Look at the Vinny Magalesh, Craig Jones grappling match that happened.
Yeah.
The other week. He didn't even realise his knee was done in until he stood up, he said. You know, like sometimes you don't realise you've got the injury at the time. It could kick in a little bit later on in the session, and then that can have issues. So I know I always think that sparring is really good for people that want to compete. They know what they want to do. They want to give it, have a few fights. But for people that just go, oh, I just want the experience of doing it once and then that's kind of it. It's like, I don't know. Is it worth the risk, really? And that's their choice.
But I always, so at Exile, I always found that you were the guy who would be like, be careful and look after each other. Other people would say that, but I always felt that you were the one who pushed that agenda the most. And that's mostly why I liked sparring in your classes. Do you not think it's better to be in those classes enforcing that and making sure that happens? Because it sounds like you've gone away from it altogether. I understand the accidental part and the one person going hard and not. But if you're not there telling people to go light, will anyone?
Yeah, and like I say again, it's not go light, it's just like look after, like be sensible, like if you can take the shot and you see someone's not going to be able to like properly protect themselves, you pull it. You got to, and also like, it would just be nice if you could always spar within the weight category. You always had people with an experience that wasn't so great, above you and wasn't so beneath you, and the weights were there that meant that you were never going with someone too big or too small. That it was like how the competition was going to be, and that would be really ideal. And it's just hard sometimes to get that. And you can have somebody, a lightweight and a heavyweight, and they're the only two people in the session. Maybe, I've had that before. What use is that for anybody? And sometimes it's not always the bigger person that goes hard. Like sometimes the smaller person feels they have to go harder because they're going with the bigger person. And then the bigger person goes, hang on a minute, like, what are you trying to take my head off? It's better when you can have a really nice level playing field and you're all trying to grow and get better together. I just found that sometimes sparring for me was mainly making sure that it was safe, as opposed to giving tactical advice, improving people on a level, because I'm too busy going, watch out for them over there, calm down there. I think you get a lot more benefit when you've just got two people sparring and you can really, really watch them and give advice and break it down and make it a learning session, rather than 50 people sparring at the same time, which happens in every martial arts gym. And you're more or less trying to stop people from banging into each other or tripping over the people that have just taken someone down. And, it's those things. It's tiring at the end of the day, or for actual fight breaks out, which it does do. Being sparring classes where people take one thing the wrong way, and then all of a sudden there's a fight on it, or on your hands, or going down A&E on a Thursday night at 10 o'clock's just not fun.
Yeah, I can see why that would be a discouragement for you to keep doing it.
Yeah, but it is definitely, those things are needed. It's just, I was just a little bit tired of that. And what happens now if I take a striker class? I love it. I'm watching Thai boxing day today, old school Thai boxing. And I enjoy it, stepping away a little bit, enjoys it. And I love the grappling. I really do love the grappling, which everyone thinks I'm just a pad man, but, I like the grappling. But what are you guys training at the moment?
Well, currently, nothing right now. Of course.
Or just full lockdown?
Yeah. So the new gym, Urban Warriors Academy, it's not that old actually. I guess it's like 4 years old now. But there are some guys there who are really legit and like really like want to go UFC. But what I found cool about it is it's very much the don't give each other CTE vibe. And I don't know if I would have carried on with MMA when I got there if it was heavy sparring and people smacking each other up kind of thing. It's way more gentle. There's a huge Ju-Jitsu crowd. There's Ju-Jitsu on 5 days a week, I reckon, in one way or another. And they've got a lot of good competitors there. I guess the thing I didn't realize at Exile is that, like you said about the wrestling, that is not something you get very often in UK gyms. So loads of, I wouldn't say it's Muay Thai. I'd actually say I'm probably doing more boxing now than anything else. My kicks have fallen a little bit. They need to work on them. Plenty of jiu-jitsu, and it's more sub-only based in the no-gi classes. The wrestling's probably fallen down a little bit, but I don't know. I'd like to fight again. I mean, I fought again at the end of last year. No, sorry, the end of the year before. Then last year got injured for just about the entire thing, so couldn't come back. I was going to do it again a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
Then this happened. So I guess that's where I'm at the moment.
Yeah. Alex, you training before all this kicked off?
Yeah, I was. I've had more of a history of training Thai boxing. I was training since I was like 15. So, but like with on and offs at uni, I didn't really. I maybe trained like 1 year, and then the other year was just sparring. Because it was. Do you remember Alec, the Polish Alec? Yeah. So we were like, we always went together, and we liked sparring with each other because we both kind of understood our
Polish way
pretty well. Well, just like we were going hard, but not like hard shots to the head and so on. So it was a great relationship there for sparring. But anyway, so I've mainly had a striking background, but since maybe last year, I want to say September or something, I started jiu-jitsu. So I've been doing jiu-jitsu. I'm like a 2-stripe white belt at the moment.
Well, that's cool. Are you enjoying it?
Oh yeah, I'm totally hooked. Like 100% of just I was watching on Flow Grappling's YouTube channel. I was just watching the Gary Tonin versus JT Torres match.
Yeah, I just watched it before. Yeah, the Saturday.
Yeah, it's a good match.
Yeah, technical.
I found it interesting how everyone's gone to jiu-jitsu now. Not just you and Alex. I mean, so last year we had the reunion for the university club, and no one there strikes anymore. No one strikes, but everyone does grappling. Like you remember Big Tommy and just like all these ex-presidents. They're all jiu-jitsu guys now.
Yeah, I think that it's nice not to get hit in the head too much. Especially if you've got a career, you've got to turn up to a meeting the next day with a black eye or whatever.
It's also hard to find a gym that, like maybe where they are now as well. The gyms are not very tailored towards like a normal person's life when it comes to sparring. Like you said, like you have more hardcore people coming in.
Yeah, you need to separate the people that want to end up in Glory or the UFC with Joe Bloggs who wants to turn up there with the kids and have fun, and that can be the challenge sometimes, isn't it? We always had it that we had a dedicated sparring night, and so you kind of hopefully knew what you were going to be getting into. So it's good for that. It's just people being honest with themselves, about where they should go, and it's nice if you can have a good few months of just training and just learn the technique and getting to know the people that you're going to be sparring with, really.
That's true.
But the same thing, injuries. I mean, in grappling, they can be just as bad, if not worse.
I get injured worse in grappling than I do in striking. Striking, I get bruised more, I get bashed up more. But the actual injuries I've had, anything I've snapped or twisted, it's all it's mostly wrestling, if anything.
Yeah, no, wrestling is just brutal. But I think it's a different type of thing. I think when you're grappling, you get like almost like immediate injuries quite often, rather than maybe back issues that can heal over the next few weeks or, heaven forbid, months. With striking, it's like the stuff that happens to your brain that affects you later on down the road. You don't realise it then. I've obviously got issues from just holding pads. I've got like my hands shake. I thought I had Parkinson's. There are issues even from just holding pads.
You don't think about that.
Sorry?
You don't think about that. You don't think that that's something people would have trouble with. That's bad.
Yeah, it's like I think there was a study of people wakeboarding, and it showed even then, or heading the football, how much damage you get with your brain. Right, you've got to try to look after it. Sensible pads, the right gloves, and things like that. But
so you'd prefer so you'd prefer that instant injury that you can about that you heal up.
I don't know about that.
I mean, I would. I prefer that to the alternative.
Yeah, I think it's all very around it. It's when I had neurodyspraxia when I couldn't feel my arm from after grappling one time. That was quite scary, and or when you bust your ACL or something like that. That's
that was the Vinny injury was weird, right? Because it was a spiral fracture. His ligament didn't give out, but his bone broke first. Which is really weird. That was, I think that was one of the reasons why he didn't tap, because usually it's the ACL or whatever. I don't know which one gives out first when it comes to yeah, and usually that gives out before the bone gives, but in this case it was the bone that gave out.
I don't understand why that wouldn't make him tap. Oh, his ligament didn't break. It was only his bone. Yeah,
it was only a spiral fracture.
Yeah,
I think he says that he gets put in leg locks quite a lot and he doesn't really feel them, but it's different when Craig Jones has got your heel, I think.
Yeah, my legs bend a long way, but if Craig Jones gets my heel and then it's facing the same way as my face is.
I remember, Robbie, because I remember people sort of know that I quite like leg locks and stuff, and I had it recently with two people who they were like, I don't feel it, and I'm thinking, really, and then one of them, I've done it and it's just gone, and my God, I was like, but thankfully it was only dislocation, but I thought I'd snapped his foot quite badly, and there was and there was somebody else as well, and it's just,
God,
I think everything's going to break just because you don't feel it.
Yeah, I think you had a word with me about that once. You're like, I know you can resist them quite well. I know they bend quite far, but one day your foot's just going to sort of fall out, and you might not want to. You might want to tap a little earlier from now on. I think I'd start doing it after that.
I think sometimes you don't even realize it till the next day as well. Like, oh, my foot's injured from that, leg lock that I was putting, or foot lock. It's just training. You should be able to tap and we're fine with it. Of course, there should be a bit where you're trying to escape. But I think if somebody actually has to sort of let you out of it because they don't want to break anything, sometimes you're best just to, just tap or flow on. But it's up to the person doing it. I know I just feel bad when you accidentally injure someone, because you're training too hard and you're thinking, well, that's not right. And then you're still doing it, it's that ego thing sometimes as well, isn't it? I know there's people that I don't want to tap to sometimes, and you go way past it and you go, that hurts, I should have tapped them, but I'm not going to, and then you leave the gym pretending you're right, and then you get to the car and you're like,
I found it weird that they won't tap with you though, because the ego thing tends to be more of a problem where you've got someone who you don't think should be as good as you. When you've got your coach talking on your ankle, you should be He's going to get me.
I don't know. I've seen people try and roll hard with my coach, and I'm like, you're a white belt. What are you doing?
Yeah.
Or even like blue belts that are at our gym. I see some of them, very few, but one or two. I see them trying to roll hard with our coach, and it's just weird.
I think it depends what you mean by rolling hard, though, because I don't think you should just go easy on them because you have this sort of figure of respect. I've heard that in like Brazilian culture, from all the thousands of podcasts I listen to, because that's all there is to do now, if you going really easy on a coach, it's almost like an insult because, you know, they can take you. They're a black belt. If you're just going easy on them, it's kind of insulting that you're just letting them win.
I think the difference is it's are you actively trying to go out and hurt someone without, you know, like when you're with that person that flails around and they're like, there's a difference between being like aggressive in a kind of angry way and then rolling hard, you know, like, you know, I think also because it's coming from sort of a catch wrestling influence and a wrestling influence, you go hard, like you always go hard, but that doesn't mean that you're going angry. And I think that's what you sometimes get is like you get the new person comes in and they get angry and they're trying to like actively hurt you. I think you can go hard without going, I want to hurt you. You're more like going, I want to get in a submission, I want you to tap. Whereas some people going, I'm going to take your head off kind of thing. I think that's what the difference is. You can go hard without being angry, you know. And the amount of times I've been to, you know, or people I teach go to certain BJJ classes somewhere else and they get told off for going too hard. You know, I've had quite a few students come back and say, oh, they said that I shouldn't be doing that, or I reaped the leg, or, you know, I'd stuck my finger in their ribs or whatever, or I was cranked on their neck.
Dan, you didn't tell us oil checking was illegal. Why wouldn't you do that?
Yeah, no, yes. But some schools don't like that, do they? I mean, I don't know what your school's like. Some schools don't like people that are like cross-facing and doing all this.
Oh, right. Okay.
My coach at the moment says he's basically like, if you can do it, he's like, is it legal? That's what he tends to say. He's like, is it legal? And it tends to be legal. Whatever it is you're doing is almost always legal because we roll like sub-only rules in no-gi. So that means don't jab them in the eyes and don't bite them.
Yeah.
And then you're good.
I understand people doing it for IBJJF competitions. You should probably roll to the rules.
Mm-hmm.
Much like, you know, if you're, otherwise it's like, you know, somebody playing netball but doing it with basketball rules. You know, it's not the same sport. And I think that's the thing is that in a gi, IBJJF is different from submission grappling. You know, they're not the same sport. Yeah. Thai boxing and kickboxing are different sports. You know, submission underground or ADCC is a different sport from, you know, IBJJF gi bouts. You know,
absolutely, yeah.
You know, the thing is that I always find is that, you know, that some students, you know, like if it was me and Benny Carr, we'd be sticking our thumbs in their ears and like being a real, you know, bit of an arse to each other, and we're fine, we'd laugh about it. But if there's a person that I don't know that comes in and starts sticking their finger in my ear or something, well, you know, fortunately I know 10 times, you know, worse stuff than that I'm going to do back. You know, you get warning and then that's going to be it, you know, or just hand over to Yanis or something. But you know, you've got to know the person, I think, well enough and agree that you're both okay with doing this. I think it's like sparring, like two people who know each other, know really well, spar as hard as you want because you know each other, but you can't do that if you don't have that same relationship.
It's that familiarity thing. I mean, yeah, it's having that relationship. It means, you know, you're not, if you can go and have a laugh with the guy afterwards, it's kind of all right to go a bit more on it. If you don't know, if afterwards the guy's going to be a dick or you don't know what it's going to be like, yeah, it's a bit more uncomfortable. It's like making a really rude personal joke to a stranger or making a really rude personal joke to one of your mates.
That's it. With your friends, you can say stuff you can't say to people, around groups that you don't know. And I think it's the same with training as well, definitely. And also that you're both in there for the same reason, is that if I help you get better, you help me get better. If it's just going to be one-sided, but I'm just going to dominate you because my ego or whatever, that's not really cool, is it? Like, if you're with somebody that's a lot less experienced, let them move around you and stuff, let them throw jabs at you and practice your parrying or your defense. You don't need to just crush them. And I see that happen a lot,
In everything, or just in sparring, or sorry, just in the striking, or
I think in everything, you always get the odd person that can't switch off, that can't maybe just go, oh, this person's 50 kilos lighter than me and it's their first time, I'm going to take them down. Or, they're using it as like a grappling dummy or as a sparring dummy just to try new things. I'm going to put a twister on this person who's never been here before.
Do you know what? That happens to me because I'm a pretty light guy. Like I'm 65 kilos, something like that. Pretty skinny dude. And I roll with other white belts who are heavier than me, and they go quite hard, as in they put all of their weight on. I remember one time I was trying to post, and this guy who was like, I don't know, 20, 30 kilos heavier than me, just like puts all his weight on my arms, and my shoulder again popped out in a similar way. I thought, I mean, okay, you're 30 kilos heavier than me. That was going to happen.
Yeah.
You didn't have to put all of your weight on.
It's quite funny because when those people give you advice, it's like, yeah, all right, mate. That's what I think coaches that are like quite small and really good, like are good for some people because they know how, the struggle that you're probably going through, I think that's why it's quite good that I've got a few heavyweights that I don't mind grappling with, because I can then relate to how you feel there. And then I know when I go with somebody particularly lighter that, oh yeah, try to keep that in mind,
Yeah.
Well, it's like you were saying earlier about neither person really gets much out of it if it's big differences in skill or big differences in weight. Like if one person's bulldozing the other, no one really learns anything.
No. It has to be really stripped back to kind of like, okay, I know that this is what, my advantage or, and how I'm going to help encourage them. Because a heavyweight should be able to spar a lightweight, providing they both understand that, each other is got a difference. So we're just going to maybe go a bit slower. We're just going to move around a little bit. You can do that. It can be done. Maybe it just doesn't happen when you've got a heavyweight that wants to fight and you've got a lightweight who is just turning up for a bit of fitness, and it happens to be a sparring class or something like that, whether it's grappling or striking or MMA or whatever. It's just not going to work, in my opinion. I bet there are some coaches that can make it work. It's just my own friend, somebody who teaches, that I'm just not very good at that.
I find your grappling class is interesting in any case, though, because I'm never really sure how you got to that point because you're not a jiu-jitsu guy, and you're not like and you always talk about catch wrestling, but catch wrestling's very hard to come by in this country. So I always think you've got a different angle to teaching it, and I'm never sure how you've got to that point.
No, I think what had happened is that when my first ever UFC that I watched was accidentally, because I was into like Thai boxing and K1, and my mate was like, you got to see this, and I wasn't so much into the MMA then, and it was Josh Barnett versus, I want to say, Pedro Hizzo, and it was like, oh, Josh Barnett's into heavy metal, I'm into heavy metal as well, but Pedro Hizzo's the Muay Thai guy. Oh, who do I support? The guy that's into heavy metal and comics, or the Muay Thai guy? I'm torn now because I've got to choose someone, and I think I was upset that Pedro Hizzo was losing. And being young, I decided to root for the winner. So I won either way, So that was maybe an introduction to catch wrestling. And then I didn't realise is that I wanted to buy a book on grappling, and the only book I could find was Ken Shamrock's book. I didn't know the difference between catch wrestling and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or any of that at the time. I just bought it, and I think one of the first pages is a toe hold. So when I did go to a grappling class, the first thing I was doing was toe holding and leg locking, and all that. And it was a lot, less thought out than the current Danaher guys or Craig Jones or any of the modern game. But it was a start. And I think the fact then that these people that I was going with were saying, "Oh, you're not allowed to do that," made me go, well, obviously that's good then. I should be learning that. I think when someone says you're not allowed to do that, like that's unfair, that's cheating, you go, well, I'm using that. And it led me to Eric Paulson and Tom Erickson, Frank Shamrock, and then on into like Riley Bodycoon, and and what I found was really good is that against like the people that came from more of a wrestling background, the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu worked more successful, and against the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guys, the more catch stuff worked. And really, it's because they hadn't seen what Eva was doing, so it's kind of like I would just go, "Oh, I'm gonna do what Eric Paulson was doing," because they've not seen that before, And then with the wrestlers, Paul Garden, you do what Marcelo Garcia would try to do. Not that I can do even the minutest bit of what Marcelo can do, because he's amazing, but it's very much, I think, take people away from where they're experienced. Because what had happened to me is that, I think we get a confirmation bias, don't we, that our choices that we make are the best choices. So I was brought up in a boxing family, so boxing was the best. And then I remember I sparred a guy doing Sanda, and he kicked the crap out of me, and my boxing was useless. So then I was like, wow, Sanda and Thai boxing are the best. And then I went to a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu class, got taken down, and I was like, hang on a minute, there's no best, really. There's, if you could somehow take one of those assets and learn enough of the other thing, you can use that better. So boxing isn't the best, but if you can learn the other things to do it, so you have to force them to box, hopefully you'll have the advantage there. Much like people weren't doing spinning kick. Or, well, the best example is no one was striking the first few UFCs. And once they got, their wrestling up and their grappling game up, they could then strike. It's a bit of a circle, isn't it? I mean, what do you guys think about the fact that, people becomes, first of all, they were so specialised at something, they were lacking somewhere, and that they got taken advantage of by the person who could do everything, because they could out-grapple them just enough to, strike them. But then they become so general, they're not specialised, that one person just learns this one thing to get them to the specialist area, then they're screwed. Like Damien Meyer, I suppose, did. Do you think it just is a circle that keeps going round and round?
I think there's another example of that is Ryan Hall. His game is pretty much purpose-built for grappling.
Habib?
He strikes. Yeah, Habib as well. Yeah.
Ryan Hall's got a really interesting striking style, though, in the fact that it's those kicks. And the reason those kicks work is because he's always out of the danger zone for boxing. You watch him, he's either at kicking range and he's flailing his legs around. The danger is that he falls over, in which case he's closer to your legs anyway, in which case he wins. Or then and then as soon as he does get too close, you know what he does? He just ragdolls, falls to the floor, and then he's at your legs again. Anyway, he's got... I don't know if Ryan Hall's a good example for anything here, because he's just so weird.
I think it's because much like they were saying the Moroccans in K1 would do these crazy kicks where if they fail, they just end up on the floor and they restart, or if they land, they're going to take your head off. Mm-hmm. Because the fight stops in K1 when they hit the floor, it's okay. With MMA, you don't really necessarily want to hit the floor because you're in danger, but not if you're Ryan Hall, who would like someone probably to jump on top of them if they go to the floor. So, I appreciate that, and I like his kicking game. I think it's a bit weird and unique, and I like that about MMA, because what I don't get, with the MMA thing is that everyone wants to say, oh, it's Muay Thai or whatever.
Yeah.
Muay Thai striking looks totally different from MMA striking.
Yeah, totally. And some of the things, like, there are weird things about MMA striking. Like, one example I can think of, like Rob Whittaker, when he kicks, he doesn't really spin his foot. He kicks like straight. So
he doesn't turn his hips, does he?
Yeah, he doesn't turn his hips. And you can't really argue that that's wrong for MMA application. Like you could say that that's like a technically wrong kick. If you were teaching someone how to kick, you would tell them, right, rotate your hips, rotate your foot. But for MMA, that makes sense because you want to be facing your opponent if they're going for a takedown.
Yeah. I don't even think it works for MMA per se, though. I think it's about the Ryan Hall thing again. You said that people have become they got good at grappling, and they got a basis in grappling, and they've become good at striking. But I think it's too broad a term to call it striking. And grappling is a bit better broken down in that it talks about wrestling or submission or guard play, that stuff like that. What Whittaker and Hall have done is picked really specific striking skills that complement the rest of their game really well. I don't know if I can say that Ryan Hall and, I don't know, Tyson Fury are both good strikers.
Yeah, but I think it's the differences is what you perceive as good and what you perceive as effective. Because I think, like, you could say that Mayweather, arguably one of the greatest boxers, technical defensive boxers of all time. In boxing, you've become adhered to looking at certain punches thrown in a certain way. But then you look at Sambo, where you've got that Russian cast and hook that Fedor would do. Like, I watch boxing coaches go, that is awful. And you go, yeah, but he keeps knocking everyone out. And the classic story is Rocky Marciano threw this like looping overhand right. And his coaches said, that's wrong. Stop throwing that. And he said, but I'm knocking everyone out of it. And they went, oh yeah, keep doing it. like you say, is that it's maybe not as technically as pretty as what we like from. I think when you watch boxing, it looks or really good Muay Thai guy watching Pacorn today or Siancho, you go, oh god, that's gorgeous. But watching Ricardo Arona, I don't know if you guys know Ricardo Arona.
Probably don't.
Right. Ernesto Hoost, I think, has arguably got some of the most beautiful leg kicks of all time.
Yeah.
It comes up, it bends, and it goes down. Ricardo Arona's kick was like a stiff, straight leg that goes up. But my God, when he used to kick Vanderlei Silva, he was down there spinning Silva around. You go, man, a minute, that kick's not how you're supposed to do it. But it works.
I think that a similar leg kicker like that is Liam Harrison. His kicks like come up really quickly, straight up. It's not like a downward chop as well. So there's another example that people.
I just think it's an art. And at the end of the day, I remember one of my first Thai boxing coaches said to me, providing it hurts them more than it hurts you, it's all right. And I think, maybe sometimes we look at it from what is our aesthetic ideal of what looks good and which looks nice, as opposed to what's effective. And at the end of the day, what I like about MMA is it's just what's effective and what works. And people want to have the prettiest style that we're used to, but if it works, it works.
So why do you think it is that MMA has these wildly varying styles, whereas boxing, I know there are anomalies, boxing's way more rigid in how you do things. I know people can vary it a bit, but it doesn't vary like punches. It doesn't vary like Fedor versus Adesanya's punches,
Yeah, I think, but that's rule set because the rule set's tighter. You're confining things tighter, aren't you? Like there's, like the more variance you add to something, you're going to add the moves to it exponentially, I think. So in boxing, you can only hit people with your hands. Granted, I bet somebody that's really, really like amazing at studying the game could see that Philly Shao or Blackburn Crouch, this kind of shoulder roll, what Pernell Whitaker did, it's totally different from the peekaboo that Tyson had. So you do have variance within boxing, but it's maybe more nuanced because the rule set's tighter. When you open up the rule set, we're going to open up the style. It's like going, okay, we've got a watercolor challenge for painting. Well, everyone's going to paint watercolors, but when you go, we've got an art challenge, do whatever you like. People could be throwing watercolors in there with sculpture, with wood carving, with oils or blood or urine. you know, you're just opening it up for more interpretation, which I think with boxing, the rules are so tight, it's not open to the same amount of interpretation. Like, maybe that's it.
So do you not think MMA will ever become more rigid in how you do things? Because I've heard some people think that it's because MMA is quite an immature sport in a lot of ways. Boxing 50 years ago doesn't look that different from boxing today. If you know boxing really well, I'm sure it can look really different in a lot of ways. But to a casual observer, to someone like me who knows a bit about boxing, it looks pretty similar. MMA 50 years ago, didn't really exist. MMA 30 years ago looks very different from the common techniques today.
Yeah, maybe that's because back then it was more like, this is my style, this is their style. It's like karate versus wrestling, like, you know, maybe that's why. But what about then the evolution of grappling? Because like, if you look at grappling in, you know, the 2000 ADCCs or whatever versus now, I think for the no-gi game, do you think it's evolved to a point where people can see a massive difference or not? Because I know, to me, people will say it's changed a lot, but what do you guys think?
I think the interesting thing about grappling is, about Jiu-Jitsu in particular, is that the rules, there are no Jiu-Jitsu rule sets, which kind of circles back to what we were saying earlier about stuff being illegal. Stuff doesn't tend to be illegal in Jiu-Jitsu. Stuff tends to be illegal in IBJJF. Yeah. Grappling changes a lot because the popular rule sets keep changing so dramatically, which is why these different rules come into play so much.
So basically, it's like IBJJF is like your boxing, and submission grappling is like your MMA, where it's evolving as people's body types changes, strength and conditioning changes, as people just can come up with new things and interpret the rules in not interpret the rules in new ways, but they're discovering new things because they're not bound by a certain rule set. Whereas maybe in IBJJF, I know like new stuff comes up with like worm guard and all that, but the moment it starts like slowing the game down, they quickly try to nip it in the bud, like 50-50 or something like that. Maybe that's the reason why, again, it's the fact that a lot of people now are thinking in jiu-jitsu gyms, and this is my experience from the outside because I don't do gi jiu-jitsu at all, so I might be completely wrong. But when they're turning up to gyms now, they're learning IBJJF style jiu-jitsu as opposed to the Gracie jiu-jitsu that was self-defense. I think it's like taekwondo, is that taekwondo was this art that could do all these things, and judo as well, that could do everything. And then all of a sudden we can't teach that anymore because you're not allowed to do that in WTF or whatever it is in taekwondo, or judo, you weren't allowed to then attack the legs in a certain way, so we don't teach that anymore. And you're not learning a martial art, you're learning a rule set for a sport. I think that's the sad thing with jiu-jitsu, the way Brazilian jiu-jitsu might be going. Again, I don't know because I don't do Brazilian jiu-jitsu in a gi, that you're turning up and they're saying, oh, you can't reap the leg, you can't do that because it's not part of the rules. But that was part of the martial art. You know, I want to go and learn the martial art. I don't care about the sport. I don't really care about MMA as a sport. I care about the martial art side of things and learning.
Yeah, things seem to be going towards sport focus rather than the martial art. They go like learning, as you say, learning the martial art. Everything is like, let's focus on the sport side, not the purity side of the martial art.
That's because of the money.
Yeah, the gyms get more money from that, right?
Well, sponsorship.
Well, what, sponsorship in jiu-jitsu? It's like a free T-shirt, isn't it?
You think, because if we just do a martial art, what are people going to pay to watch? You know, if you're going to do a sport, you're going to pay to watch a sport, and you're going to get a top athlete, Gordon Ryan or someone, and then all of a sudden they're going to want sponsorship to show their gi, they're going to, or their rash guard. Sport is how I think you expose it to television, to those things.
I see what you're saying, but one way I disagree is that jiu-jitsu tends to keep all of those things interlinked, not necessarily self-defense, but the no-gi submission grappling and the gi grappling tend to be in the same classes. there might be or the same gyms, right? So people end up doing these various rule sets. Even within gi grappling, grappling industries is one of the most popular competitions at the moment. Pretty brand new, just super popular, and they let you do knee reaping in the gi.
Yeah,
so
I know.
It's these things that just completely disrupt the rule set. So I know what you mean by it tending more towards the sports side of things, but I think the fact that you've got all these aspects mixed up means it disrupts that.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's just, I think, like, if you go to, you know, from what I hear, because I don't go there, but people will go to a lot of gi classes, I know, and it's, we've got an IBJJF competition coming up, we're doing this style, or you're a white belt, you're not allowed to do leg locks because you've got to be brown belt to do leg locks, or something like that. Like, say, if they're going, okay, we've got a Naga competition, we can do that, we can do these things, but again, it's geared towards the sport, and, you know, as opposed to, I think, you know, the Gracies, I don't think, like, especially, you know, Hickson would have gone, oh, you're not allowed to do that to win a fight. He would do anything.
I think it really depends on the. I think it really depends on the coach. Like, my coach, I think he grew up with that Gracie mindset. So even though all of us, like a lot of the guys compete, and they compete under IBJJF rules, I think also because we do a lot of no-gi, it means that we interlink the two quite a bit. And I think maybe that helps. If a gym is only gi-based, they will probably only focus on IBJJF techniques. But if they're actually doing a bit of both, then maybe they expose or they teach other techniques.
You're dead right. I think if you go to a Colson Gracie school, they're all top game, smash them on top. They're, you know, ruthless guys, you know. I think it definitely there. You know, I think it's just what competitions people are going to. The school are going to say, we want people to go to those competitions. We want people to pay their membership. How much does it cost to enter these jiu-jitsu competitions at the moment? Some of them
anything from like 60 quid up.
60 quid for the cheapest ones.
Yeah.
Like, and then is it right?
IBJJF is like 120 pounds or something, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's ridiculous.
Yeah, and then you've got to pay like your membership, and if you want to go up in the belts, you've got to compete. So you've got, not every school, but I believe some schools you've got to compete to go up a belt or whatever. It's an expensive sport, you know, for the lay person anyway, you know.
But what I think is, though, that the earlier you are on in trying out jiu-jitsu, the less specialized it becomes. I think if you're going to be a absolute top level submission grappler, you probably have to go to a school which is just doing no-gi grappling. If you want to be a completely top level gi grappler, you're going to have to go to a school that's completely focused on gi IBJJF rule set. But I think that's quite far removed in terms of being top guys in the world, being really high competitive, to people who are just coming into the sport. And when you're just coming into the sport, you do everything. You do the self-defense bits, you do the no-gi bits, and the submission-only bits, and you do the gi.
Yeah, it's just not. It'd be nice to see, like, I think, like, that Gracie style of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or Gracie Jiu-Jitsu coming back. So, like, what Hina and I know his brother Hina. So the guys are with him, always with him. You know.
Yeah, Hina Gracie. Yeah.
They do that old school type of. They can do the IBJJF stuff, but they've also got the self-defense element. I've got like a book up here of like the bounce from white to black, and there's kicking in it and there's punching in it.
I think they get a lot of hate because of their jiu-jitsu university, but I think they do a lot of good stuff.
They do loads of good stuff. They do.
Yeah. Like with women, like they do the women, I don't know if it's women empowerment or women jiu-jitsu, and
they do bulletproof for the kids. They do Gracie bulletproof.
It's more actually, like you say, it's more, let's use jiu-jitsu as a self-defense technique, not just as a sport.
Yeah, you know, but I think like the sport aspect does bring a realism into the self-defense, which just the self-defense aspect doesn't always have. Jiu-jitsu is a lot better than that. But I remember going to class back in the day where it would be like, yeah, take my wrist, and your hand at your wrist. They go, oh no, not that one, the other one. It's like,
I love McDojo Life on Instagram. It's just the best page. It's all stuff like that, like the no touch knock KOs and stuff like that. Just amazing content. I love it.
But you got those old school. I remember, like, I've grown up doing martial arts for years and would buy, like, all the Black Belt magazine and all these things, and I swallowed all that BS, like, and I loved it. I really did believe in all that, and I wanted to believe in it. But I think in the back of my head, actually, maybe there was something going, hang on a minute, like, that's not quite right. And it's not until you meet, like, in Southampton, we've got Lee Morrison, and it's like, well, if you want to learn actual, like, protection for the street, really extreme, you go to Lee Morrison, but you're potentially going to be biting someone's nose off and gouging their eyes out, and, but I think that's the reality of, like, what actually happens in the street. Okay, today I just saw the news, I don't know if you saw my Facebook post about Pacorn, the Thai boxer. He's got into okay, we don't know the full stories, but there's probably the greatest Thai boxer around at the moment. Suppose he got out clinched in a barber shop by his barber mate and then stabbed in the shoulder with some scissors.
Jesus.
Seen fleeing the scene. At what point does our martial arts become so adhered to a rule set that they're not applicable for the street anymore? But then at what point are they so removed from any sort of physicalness in the dojo or in your training grounds that they're not applicable to the street? There's got to be a balance somewhere of how you train, for that. And Lee, I can't speak highly enough of him. It's all about that sort of knowing that fence and knowing where to go down there. I mean, knowing where you are. If you're on a bus, like, Taekwondo is not going to help you on a bus, is it? You're sat down on a seat. If you're on a muddy field, your best self-defense is probably just 400 meters, or decathlon or something like that, where you're sort of running and jumping over stuff, than a martial art, or common sense to avoid an altercation in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think that it's quite good to know how to defend yourself, but I think there's two parts. I mean, firstly, I think back when I did Taekwondo and I was a kid, and they would do these knife defenses, I think they were a really shocking idea, actually. Telling a 13-year-old kid how supposedly to defend a knife is, I think, probably one of the most irresponsible things you could possibly do, because when you're young, you're an absolute, you probably believe it. Now looking back on it, I'm like, good God, like it was that guy where it was like, oh no, not that wrist, take the other one. It was stuff like that. Like, what am I going to do? Some bloke's going to come and move a knife, and like at 13 years old, I'm going to kick that knife out of his hand.
Yeah, outside crescent kick. But I think, Robbie, I don't know if you were there when I started to say at the university, but what I started to say at some point was, and the freshers course is like, just because you're doing this doesn't mean now that you can walk across the parks in Southampton in the middle of the night. Please don't let this give you a full sense of confidence that you can handle yourself walking through the street. Because
I was watching there's this guy. This guy. Come on, what's his name? Green Beret from the UFC. Tim
Kennedy.
Tim Kennedy, yeah. I was watching like podcasts of him. Like, you might know this guy. Yeah. So Tim Kennedy, obviously Green Beret, super hardcore dude, been to Afghanistan. Even he goes through his, like, he has this like mindset of like, oh, where am I? I'm in a bar. Or like I'm on a parking lot. I see some guys over there in a car. They're like gathered together. Probably not the best place to go there. So like he's not thinking, oh, I'm a hard CUNT and I'm gonna, like, I can walk anywhere. Even he's thinking, oh, where's the danger here? Should I risk it? Should I not risk it? That kind of thing. So that absolutely doesn't mean just because you train in martial art that you should put yourself at danger.
Yeah, or have that confidence to think that, oh, I can be here, I can walk past down that alleyway or whatever because I can handle myself. you know, Henzo Gracie can walk down that. You know, he's you know, and he'll tweet about it while he's doing it. But Joe Bloggs, who goes to 2 classes a week, who in some martial arts, let's say they don't spar, they don't do any sort of physicality, they're probably not prepared to do that, you know. Whereas I know of some people who in their wallet have, you know, when you get an old credit card or debit card and they say cut it up, they will cut that up to a spike, you know, a sharp. You know, those things are sharp, aren't they? Right? And they will have that as a dummy card. So if anyone marches them to a cash point, they think they're going to pull out that dummy card and stab them in the neck with that spiky, sharp card. You know, but that is premeditated. Like, you can't be. I
don't think it's even that. I think that's a complete dissonance about what the benefit here is. Like, okay, what's going to happen? I'm going to take out that money. Okay, let's say I completely capitulate of everything they want. Take out that money, hand it over to them. They're probably going to leave. They're probably not going to stab you. If I pull out that card and I go and try and jab them with it, someone's getting stabbed. Probably me. Not only that, but when they take the money and then leave, the bank is almost definitely going to give it straight back to you afterwards, and then they're going to pursue charges. Well, what's the benefit here?
Yeah, I just would love to see someone in court when they say, "Oh yeah, you had a dummy credit card cut into a spike and you stabbed someone in the throat who wanted 20 quid from the cash point." You know, like, you don't have a leg to stand on. You know,
not really.
but again, though, it is almost like an extreme version of that Tim Kennedy story, like you said. Is there are people out there that are prepared that in this situation. Like my mum will. I don't know what she's going to do. She has keys sticking out of her knuckles when she walks down the street, and she's like, "Oh, I'll stick a key." I'm not. Yeah, okay, whatever, mum. But you know, she is always. My mum has always looked at those surroundings, though, because of the life that my mum's had to have. It's just sad, though, that people sometimes can't enjoy their life because they're so worried they're going to get attacked. And there are people like that as well.
That's the
first
true thing I thought when you said about the Tim Kennedy story.
You know, because at the end of the day, is you're more likely probably to have a heart attack than you are being attacked. You know, so do martial art because it makes you fit. Maybe, you know. How many times have you guys left the gym with an injury, right? That if you were attacked, you couldn't fight back anyway because your knees.
Yeah.
I most beat up after, you know, I've been wrestling for 2 hours. If someone wants to mug me after a class.
Yeah, you're not going to be able to run, let alone to fight him off. Yeah.
No, but you're dead right there, Robbie. Like, that teaching a 13-year-old kid knife defense is just, it's irresponsible. You know.
You know the worst bit? I think they did it because it's fun.
Yeah.
And martial arts are fun, and martial arts are meant to be fun. But the consequence of it is just too much.
Do you reckon maybe then that's the problem with having self-defense classes? Actually, maybe, like, I'm going to be completely hypocritical here, is going back to it being a sport, is at least we're not saying it's self-defense and that, you know, you're now prepared for the streets or whatever it is.
I think it's a marketing problem, because if I market a class where I say, hey, come and learn self-defense, it probably isn't going to save you. In some unlikely circumstance, it might save your life 1%, maybe. But actually, if anything happens, what's better to do is just completely capitulate with it, but still pay and come to my class anyway.
Yeah,
I'm out of business in a week, right? I can't do that. I'm sure, like, Krav Maga teachers still give people a realistic sense of what they can do, or at least explain to them, hey, look, better just to run away, better not to fight people, stuff like that. But you still have to give the impression that this is the way to fight and that people are going to be able to fight after they come to your class. It's just the way that self-defense has to be taught.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard of quite a few high-level martial artists as well, like really good fighters in the, you know, in the ring and stuff, you know, not do too good in the street when the attitude is different, where you've got somebody that you don't know who actually wants to hurt you in an aggressive, hateful way, as opposed to in a sporting contest where it's like, we touch gloves. It's like, yeah, this is a sport. Yeah, now I'm going to do what I'm going to do, as opposed to in the street, someone's going to go, I'm going to kill you, you know. That is quite, first of all, you've got to kind of adjust yourself to that, you know. So maybe it's just the fact that doing it for a sport, the byproduct is that should anything happen where you can't just run away or whatever, you might be able to get one up. Maybe it's just a byproduct of doing the sports that we love to do.
Well, I always think that actually, I think there's two things. I think firstly, the only people who need to do proper, like legitimate self-defense classes where you learn how to like kill someone in an actual situation are people who are going to be involved in like hostage scenarios, or maybe even police officers, soldiers, stuff like that, right? People who are actually going to be in a elevated risk of being in a deadly situation where someone's trying to kidnap them or do something terrible to them, right? Those are the only people who really need to learn that stuff. But I actually think the most effective way of learning how to defend yourself is the one where you're putting most hours in live training. And that's not self-defense classes. That's an MMA class. And you know what? You don't learn after 2 weeks. You learn after 5 years. And even then, probably still not a good idea to get into a fight with someone who's got whatever they've got in their pockets.
Yeah, I think there's also a mind sense and something that's more in here with regards to what happens in the street. Like, you know, I've taught doormen who couldn't fight for toffee, you know, who the thought of having a fight in 6 weeks' time would, you know, oh my God, you know, I can't do that right. But on the door, they're phenomenal. You know, they're the people that you'd want there, because, and I think this is how, not that I was phenomenal on door, but like, I suffer from anxiety. When I used to compete years ago, it was the fact that I knew the date, I knew the time, you know, that was the build-up was worse than the fight. But when I got in trouble in the streets, which is thankfully pretty rare, it was easy. It was like, oh, I've just got to react. I've just got to do this. You know, that's fine. I've not had the chance to make all these different scenarios in my head, which you do in competition. You know, competition, I think, is more of a fight against yourself.
Absolutely. I totally think that. I totally agree with that. Absolutely. It's totally a fight with yourself, nothing else.
And self-defense is more about a fight about protecting, fending off this aggressor. Because, you know, competition is just it's a different thing where you've got people watching you, and, you know, the damage to your ego or those things.
I think the terror of competition is not... The danger of getting hurt isn't actually the thing that scares me the most. It's the performance anxiety.
Yeah.
I get just as nervous if I'd have to do like a public speaking event as if I had to do an MMA fight. Possibly worse at public speaking, because I don't know what the hell I'm doing. At least I've got an idea with MMA.
I'm sure you do. But I think that's why, like they say, is you know, some of the greatest coaches have never competed, or, you know, because they have the empathy of what the fighter's going through from maybe other aspects in their life. Sometimes I think this is, again, is that if you've got like certain coaches work really well with certain athletes, and I think it's about the mindset of, like, if a coach has a similar mindset to the athlete that he's got, he can put himself in their shoes, know what they want. But if you've got, you know, a coach that is just not scared of anything, they're just going to go in there and all that, but you're an athlete that's like, oh, actually I suffer from a bit of anxiety, it's sometimes, you know, people don't always know maybe how best to act with that, get the best out of that athlete if they've got a different mindset, as opposed to like the coach that's like, oh, I'm, let's say, quite anxious. I'm anxious for my fighters, so I always seem to work better with other fighters that are also anxious, as opposed to fighters that are just not scared. Like the fighters that aren't scared, maybe I don't work quite so well with. you know, it's, if I can put myself in their shoes, I think I can get the best out of them. But that's just me, you know. I don't know what you guys think.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
We actually talked about it on an episode of the podcast before, and I think we talked about someone like Greg Jackson, for example, who doesn't really have any significant fight experience, and he seems to have produced incredibly successful fighters. But because I think he's very good at that, maybe the relating himself.
I don't know about the putting in other people's shoes, but kind of the conclusion we came to was that it's not about having the experience fighting. It's about understanding what they're going through.
Yeah,
you don't need going through it is a way to get that understanding. It's not the only way to get that understanding.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's Mark Wilberto's got a comment saying that mediocre athletes make the best coaches because they've had to work hard to try to understand. Like you know, someone ex-athlete just does stuff. Like to me, like Marcelo Garcia, he has this understanding that I just don't get, and he's a great teacher. Admittedly, I think he's the greatest grappler of all time, in my opinion. But you know, he's ex-athlete with regards to his timing, maybe not athletically, but his understanding is in here. Whereas Ryan Hall, if you watch Ryan Hall's instruction, I've had a session with Ryan Hall, a class with Ryan Hall. He's so it's forensic, like Don Danaher, that it's like they weren't gifted. They had to figure this stuff out.
Yeah.
And figuring that out, they can teach it really, really well, as opposed to some athlete who just goes, well, just do this. You know, it's like if you're really naturally really strong, you say, well, just pick it up. I can't. I've got to I need a coach who's going to train me how to lift more, as opposed to you genetically just saying, pick that thing up. You know,
I think it's true. I mean, you don't really see in MMA, when you look at the greatest coaches, they're not really super successful fighters, are they? Maybe someone like Duke Rufus.
Yeah, it's still quite a young sport, isn't it? So maybe it's hard to see, like, you know, who's going to make a great coach. I think sometimes, well, the greatest fighters, they're quite often quite selfish, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but they got to where they did because they're focused about themselves.
Yeah,
and maybe then they're not such great at the kind of the giving thing back, because I think in high school wrestling in America, a lot of their coaches are really, really good, experienced wrestlers. But I think, like you know, Ferris Sahabi, Greg Jackson, Mike Wilson-John, or I think Emmanuel Stewart, you know, or Eddie Futch. I don't think like they competed a lot, but they put the time in to understand the sport. You know, but there's not one way to skin a cat, is there? So I bet there are some amazing coaches that were amazing athletes, and there are some vice versa, and whatever. I don't know, you know, but the MMA conundrum to me is that there doesn't seem to be a singular approach that works. There seems to be many approaches that work sometimes, don't work sometimes. You know, look at strength and conditioning. Two people have completely different ways of doing their strength and conditioning, but they're both fit. You know, whereas I think in Thai boxing, that they've mastered the best way to win at Thai boxing. You know, it's like, do it like this. So this rule set, do it like this. You know, Taekwondo, do it like this. You're going to win at this. MMA, it's like, well, we don't know. You know,
there's so many variables. Maybe that's why. Yeah,
Israeli is he? I can't speak. That's CT.
Israel Adesanya.
Adesanya doesn't look anything like Nurmagomedov, who doesn't look anything like, you know, Ferguson or, you know, Barber. They're all completely different. They're all successful. I hate that there's no, you know, we can't seem to figure out why, but it's also what keeps leading me being intrigued back to it.
Yeah.
Because I think with Thai boxing, we can kind of go, well, you know, Petrosian, you know, Deckers, they've got a certain type of style. And yeah, there's maybe a few different styles, but they're kind of yeah, this is it. MMA, it's just like, fair play. Try figuring that one out.
We hope you enjoyed that episode. If you did, please consider subscribing to the podcast and checking us out on YouTube, Facebook and Instagram under the name Combat Thoughts. We'll see you next time.